The massive starship Crimson Dominion drifted silently through the void between worlds. Its hull gleamed like polished obsidian, carved with ancient draconic runes that pulsed with inner fire. Inside the ship's grand hall, Emperor Vorthak sat upon his crystalline throne, his enormous form casting shadows across marble floors inlaid with precious metals from 1,000 conquered worlds. Vorthak was ancient beyond measure, his scales the color of molten gold touched with crimson flame. His eyes burned like twin suns, and when he spoke, the very air trembled with power. For 3 millennia, he had ruled the draconic imperium with absolute authority. Entire star systems bowed before his might. Civilizations crumbled at his word. Yet today, something was wrong. The source of his distress lay curled in the corner of the throne room, his youngest offspring, Kithara. The Dragonling was barely 2 centuries old, still small enough to fit in a human's arms. Her scales were pale silver, almost translucent, and she hadn't spoken a word in months. "She grows weaker each day, my lord," reported General Morthus, his own bronze scales dulled with concern. "The court physicians are baffled. Her flame burns low and she refuses all food." Vorthak's claws scraped against the armrests of his throne. In all his long life, he had never felt such helplessness. Dragons were beings of pure elemental force, sustained by magic and will. They did not simply waste away for no reason. "Have you tried the healing crystals from Valdris Prime?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Yes, my lord. And the songs of the Cyrene healers, even the quantum physicians from the core worlds." Morthus bowed his great head. "Nothing helps." Vorthak rose from his throne, his massive form towering over even the largest of his generals. He approached Kithara, who lay motionless except for the shallow rise and fall of her breathing. When he touched her with one careful claw, she didn't respond. The Emperor of Dragons, conqueror of galaxies, felt something crack inside his ancient heart. "Perhaps," Morthus said carefully, "we should consider alternative methods. Speak plainly. There is a space station at the edge of our territory, a trading post called Haven's Rest. It serves many species, including—" He paused. "Humans." Vorthak's eyes flared with sudden heat. Humans, those weak, short-lived creatures? What could they possibly offer that our own healers cannot? "I do not know, my lord. But there are stories, tales of human empathy that transcend species barriers. They say humans have a gift for understanding." The Emperor snorted, sending small flames dancing through the air. "Superstition, perhaps. But what if it is not?" Vorthak looked down at his daughter again. Kithara's breathing had become even more labored. The thought of seeking help from such inferior beings wounded his pride, but the alternative was unthinkable. "Set course for Haven's Rest," he commanded, "but we go in disguise. I will not have word spread that the Dragon Emperor sought aid from humans." General Morthus bowed deeply. "As you wish, my lord." Within hours, the great ship had altered course, its destination a small station on the galactic rim that most of the Imperium's citizens had never heard of. Vorthak spent the journey in his private chambers, watching over Kithara and wondering if he had finally lost his mind. Haven's Rest was unremarkable, a cylindrical structure barely large enough to house 50,000 beings. Its docking bays were crowded with ships of every conceivable design, from sleek Aldrani cruisers to the patchwork vessels favored by human traders. The station's interior was a maze of markets, cantinas, and residential quarters, all designed to accommodate the wildly different needs of dozens of species. Vorthak had never set foot on such a place. He disguised himself with a portable holographic projector, taking the form of a much smaller, less impressive dragon. Kithara he carried in his arms, wrapped in soft fabric to hide her scales. To any observer, they would appear to be a minor noble and his sick offspring. The station's main promenade bustled with activity. Vorthak moved through the crowds, his enhanced senses picking up 1,000 different scents and sounds. He had no clear plan beyond finding someone who might help his daughter. That was when he saw her. The human was young by her species standards, perhaps 25 years old. She had dark hair pulled back in a practical style and warm brown eyes that seemed to see everything. She wore the simple uniform of a service worker, moving between tables in what appeared to be a dining establishment. What caught Vorthak's attention was not her appearance, but the way she moved. There was a grace to her actions, a gentle competence that spoke of someone who truly cared about her work. As he watched, She approached a table where a massive Korgan warrior sat slumped in despair. Korgans were renowned throughout the galaxy for their aggression and inability to show weakness. Yet this one was clearly struggling, his forearms trembling as he stared at a small datapad. The human, Sarah, according to her name tag, knelt beside the Korgan's chair. She spoke softly, too quietly for Vorthak to hear over the ambient noise, but her tone was gentle and non-threatening. Whatever she said caused the Korgan to look up, his 6 eyes meeting hers. Vorthak watched in fascination as the human simply listened while the warrior spoke in halting standard. She nodded at appropriate moments, occasionally placing a comforting hand on his arm. When the Korgan began to weep, something Vorthak had never seen one of their kind do, Sarah didn't flinch or show disgust. Instead, she simply waited, offering her presence as comfort. After several minutes, the Korgan straightened. His posture had changed from despair to something approaching hope. He pressed something into Sarah's hand, likely payment far beyond what her establishment normally received, and left with purpose in his stride. The entire interaction had taken perhaps 10 minutes. Yet Vorthak had witnessed something he couldn't quite name. The human had done nothing remarkable by dragon standards. She possessed no magic, no psychic abilities, no advanced technology. She had simply cared. In his arms, Cathara stirred for the first time in days. The Dragonling's head turned toward where Sarah now moved between other tables, continuing her work with the same gentle efficiency. For the first time in centuries, the Dragon Emperor found himself truly curious about another being. Perhaps General Morthus had been right. Perhaps there was something here worth investigating. He adjusted his grip on Kithra and made his way toward an empty table in Sarah's section, wondering what he was about to discover about the strange magic of human compassion. Sarah Williams had been working at Starlight Diner for 3 years, ever since she'd arrived at Haven's Rest with nothing but determination and a desire to help others. The diner served beings from across the galaxy, and she'd learned to read the subtle signs of distress that transcended species barriers. When the dragon approached her section, she noticed several things immediately. First, he was trying very hard to appear unremarkable, which in her experience usually meant the opposite. Second, he carried himself with an unconscious authority that spoke of power. Third, and most importantly, whatever he held wrapped in his arms was making him afraid. Sarah had seen fear in many forms. The sharp panic of a Centauri merchant who'd lost his cargo, the deep dread of a Nexari mother whose child had gone missing. But this dragon's fear was different, ancient and profound, like bedrock cracking under impossible pressure. "Good afternoon," she said, approaching his table with her usual warm smile. "Welcome to Starlight Diner. What can I get for you today?" The dragon's holographic disguise flickered almost imperceptibly. His golden eyes, even dimmed by the projector, seemed to pierce right through her. "I require," he began, then stopped, apparently struggling with the words. "My offspring is unwell." Sarah's heart immediately went out to him. She'd seen many worried parents pass through the diner, and the pain was universal regardless of species. "I'm sorry to hear that. Would you like a quiet booth? Sometimes a peaceful environment can help." She gestured to a corner booth away from the main traffic flow. The dragon nodded stiffly and followed her, moving with careful precision. As they walked, Sarah caught a glimpse of what he carried. A small dragon, barely larger than a house cat, with scales that seemed almost transparent. "There we go," she said softly, helping to arrange the booth's adjustable seating to accommodate the dragon's larger frame. "Now, can I bring you anything? Some of our healing broths are quite popular with visiting families. You would serve us?" The dragon seemed genuinely surprised. "Even knowing what we are?" Sarah blinked in confusion. "Your customers. Why wouldn't I serve you?" For a long moment, the dragon simply stared at her. Then something shifted in his expression, surprise giving way to something like wonder. "Most beings fear dragons. Should I be afraid?" Sarah asked honestly. "You're here because your child is sick, not because you want to hurt anyone. Fear seems like a waste of energy when I could be helping instead." The dragon carefully unwrapped the small figure in his arms. The Dragonling was beautiful but clearly ill. Her breathing was shallow, her scales lacked luster, and she barely responded to touch. Sarah's heart clenched with sympathy. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, not thinking about the fact that she was addressing dragon royalty. "What's wrong with her?" "The physicians cannot determine the cause," the dragon said, his voice heavy with grief.
She has been like this for months.
She grows weaker each day. Sarah studied the little dragon with the same attention she'd give any suffering creature. May I ask her name? Kithara. That's beautiful. Sarah knelt beside the booth, bringing herself to eye level with the Dragonling. Hello, Kithara. I'm Sarah. I know you don't feel well, but you're very brave. To everyone's surprise, including her own, Kithara's eyes opened. They were pale silver like moonlight on water, and they focused on Sarah with unexpected clarity. She responds to you, the dragon breathed. She has not responded to anyone in weeks. Sarah felt a flutter of hope. Sometimes being sick isn't just about the body. Sometimes hearts and spirits get sick too. She looked up at the dragon father. Has she experienced any trauma? Any major changes in her life? The dragon hesitated. I am often away. My duties require extensive travel. She spends much time alone or with caretakers. Ah, Sarah nodded with understanding. She's lonely. And probably scared. Young beings need connection, security, love. Without those things, even the strongest can waste away. But she is a dragon, he protested. We are creatures of power and independence. She's also a child, Sarah said gently. And children need to feel safe and loved, no matter what species they are. Don't you think so, Kithara? The Dragonling made a soft sound, the first vocalization she'd produced in months. It was barely audible, but unmistakably a response. Sarah's face lit up with joy. There you are. I knew you were in there. She turned back to the father. Would you mind if I brought her some of our special milk? It's nothing magical, just warm and sweet. Sometimes simple comfort is the best medicine. The dragon nodded, though he seemed overwhelmed by the rapid developments. Sarah hurried to the kitchen, returning with a small bowl of warmed Terran milk mixed with honey and a few drops of vanilla extract. This might taste strange at first, she said to Kithara, but I think you'll like it. She held the bowl carefully, allowing the Dragonling to smell it first. Kithara's nostrils flared slightly and then, miracle of miracles, she extended her small tongue to taste the liquid. The effect was immediate. Color began to return to her scales and her breathing deepened. She took another sip, then another until she was drinking steadily. Impossible, the dragon father whispered. How did you? It's not the milk, Sarah explained. It's the attention. The caring. She needed to know that someone was thinking about her needs, putting effort into making her comfortable. That's what heals hearts. As they watched, Kithara continued to improve. Her scales brightened, her posture straightened, and most remarkably, she began to look around with curiosity instead of listless indifference. What is your name? The dragon asked suddenly. Sarah Williams. Sarah Williams, he repeated as if testing the words. I am... Another pause. Vorth, Sarah smiled. Nice to meet you, Vorth. And you too, little lady, she added to Kithara, who made another soft sound that might have been a purr. Other customers began to take notice of the small drama playing out in the corner booth. Word spread quickly through the diner that the human waitress had somehow helped heal a dragon child. But Sarah paid no attention to the whispers and stares. Her focus remained entirely on her newest patients. She'll need continued care, Sarah said. Not medical care, emotional care. Time, attention, play, conversation. Dragons may be powerful, but your children still need what all children need. Vorth nodded slowly. I am beginning to understand that. But my duties, I cannot always be present. Then find someone who can be, or change your duties. Nothing is more important than family. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. Trust me on this one. For the first time in centuries, the Dragon Emperor found himself taking advice from a being he would have considered beneath his notice just hours before. And stranger still, he found himself grateful for it. Kithara had finished the milk and was now looking around with bright, alert eyes. When she spotted Sarah, she made a happy chirping sound and reached out with one tiny claw. Sarah extended her finger, and Kithara grasped it with surprising strength. The connection between them was immediate and profound, not magical, but purely emotional. Love, given freely and without condition. The Dragon Emperor watched this simple interaction and felt something shift inside his ancient heart. For the first time, he began to understand what humans meant when they spoke of the power of compassion. Word of the dragon child's miraculous recovery spread through Haven's Rest like wildfire. Within hours, beings from across the station were finding excuses to visit the Starlight Diner. hoping to catch a glimpse of the human who had accomplished what trained physicians could not. Sarah found the attention uncomfortable, but she couldn't bring herself to regret her actions. Kithara had spent the entire afternoon perched in the booth watching Sarah work with fascination. Every time their eyes met, the little dragon would chirp happily and wave a tiny claw. Vorth observed it all with growing amazement. He had ruled for millennia through strength and fear. Yet this simple human had achieved something far more profound through nothing but kindness. It challenged everything he thought he knew about power. "Your daughter seems much better," Sarah said during a brief lull in the dinner rush. She refilled Vorth's cup with synthetic coffee, one of the few earth beverages that dragons could digest safely. "She is transformed," Vorth admitted. "I confess I do not understand how you accomplished this." Sarah sat across from him, grateful for the chance to rest her feet. "I didn't do anything special. I just paid attention to what she needed. But our healers paid attention as well. They ran countless tests, tried every treatment known to dragonkind. They paid attention to her symptoms," Sarah corrected gently. "I paid attention to her." "There's a difference." Vorth frowned, trying to grasp the distinction. "Explain." "Your healer saw a sick dragon. I saw a lonely child who happened to be a dragon. When you're looking for physical causes, you miss emotional ones." As if to prove Sarah's point, Kithara suddenly became agitated. Her breathing quickened and her scales began to fade again. Sarah immediately noticed the change. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" she asked, moving to the Dragonling's side. Kithara was staring at the diner's entrance where a group of heavily armed Korgan mercenaries had just entered. Their massive forms and aggressive postures had cleared a path through the other customers. "She's afraid," Sarah realized. "It's okay, Kithara. They won't hurt you." But the little dragon continued to tremble. Sarah followed her gaze and understood. These weren't random travelers, they were moving with purpose, their attention focused directly on Vorth's table. "Friends of yours?" Sarah asked quietly. Vorth's expression had hardened into something dangerous. "Imperial guards. They have found us." The lead Korgan approached their booth, his 4 arms crossed in a gesture of formal respect. "Lord Vorth, we have been sent to retrieve you. Your presence is required on urgent matters of state." "I am not ready to depart," Vorth said coldly. "With respect, my lord, the Empire cannot wait for personal matters to be resolved." Sarah felt tension radiating from Vorth like heat from a forge. Around the diner, other customers were beginning to notice the confrontation. Some were discreetly reaching for weapons or communication devices. Kithara whimpered and pressed closer to Sarah, her improvement rapidly reversing under the stress. "Your orders were to locate me, not to command me," Vorth said, his voice carrying a subtle threat that made the Korgan guards shift uncomfortably. "Our orders were to ensure your swift return," the lead guard corrected. "The Zephyrian rebellion has escalated. 3 systems have fallen to their forces." Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. She was beginning to understand that Vorth was not who he claimed to be. The deference of the guards, their references to empire and lordship, the way other customers were now backing away, all pointed to one impossible conclusion. "You're not just any dragon," she said quietly. Vorth met her eyes. For a moment his holographic disguise flickered, revealing glimpses of his true magnificent form. "No, I am not. The rebellion can wait," he told the guards firmly. "My daughter's health takes precedence. My lord, thousands of lives hang in the balance, and one life sits before me," Vorth interrupted. "She is my priority." Sarah watched this exchange with growing understanding. Kithara wasn't just sick because her father was absent. She was sick because her father was the kind of being who put duty before family, who ruled through fear rather than love. But something was changing in him. She could see it in the way he looked at his daughter, in his willingness to defy his own guards. "Maybe," Sarah said carefully, "there's a third option." Both Vorth and the lead guard turned to her with expressions of surprise. "I don't know anything about running an empire," she continued, "but I know about taking care of children. Kithara needs stability, yes, but she also needs to feel like she matters to you. Maybe the solution isn't choosing between duty and family. Maybe it's finding a way to honor both." "Speak plainly." "Human," the guard demanded. Sarah ignored him, focusing on Vorth. "Take her with you. Show her that she's part of your life, not separate from it. She's a dragon, your heir presumably. Shouldn't she learn what that means?" "The battlefield is no place for a child," Vorth protested. "I'm not talking about battles. I'm talking about leadership. Let her see you as a leader, not just as an absent father. Let her understand why your work matters. Forth was quiet for a long moment, considering. Around them, the tension in the diner had reached a breaking point. Other customers were evacuating, recognizing the signs of an impending conflict between Imperial forces and whatever resistance might be hidden on the station. "And what of you?" Forth asked suddenly. "What about me? Kithara has bonded with you. Separating them now might undo all the progress we have made." Sarah felt her heart skip. "I can't leave my job, my life here. The Empire has need of those who understand the healing arts," Forth said formally. "I would be honored to offer you a position as consultant on interspecies relations." The lead guard looked scandalized. "My lord, surely you cannot be serious. A human in the Imperial court?" "I am deadly serious," Forth replied, and something in his tone made even the massive Korgan step back. "This human has accomplished more in one afternoon than all our court physicians managed in months." Her insights could prove invaluable. Sarah looked at Kithara, who was watching the conversation with intelligent eyes. The little dragon reached out and grasped Sarah's finger again, holding tight. "I don't know anything about empires or space politics," Sarah said, "but you know about compassion, about seeing beings as individuals rather than categories. The Empire has forgotten such wisdom." Sarah thought about her quiet life on Haven's Rest, her routine job, her simple apartment. Then she looked at Kithara again and saw not just a dragon child, but a being who needed her. "If I come," she said slowly, "I have conditions." Forth raised an eyebrow. "You would negotiate with an emperor?" "I would negotiate for a child's welfare," Sarah corrected. "Kithara doesn't need a governess or a tutor. She needs a friend. Someone who will always put her needs first regardless of politics or duty. Can you promise me that freedom?" "You would have complete authority over her care and education." Forth agreed immediately. The lead guard looked ready to object, but a single glance from Forth silenced him. Sarah took a deep breath, hardly believing what she was about to agree to. "Then yes, I'll come," Kithara chirped with delight, her scales brightening to their full silver radiance. For the first time in months, she looked truly healthy and happy. As Sarah handed in her resignation and packed her few belongings, she wondered what she had gotten herself into. She was about to leave everything familiar behind to care for the child of what was apparently one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. But when she looked at Kithara's trusting eyes, she knew she was making the right choice. Sometimes the most important journeys began with a single act of kindness. The Dragon Emperor had come to Haven's Rest seeking a cure for his daughter. He was leaving with something far more valuable, the beginning of understanding about what it truly meant to care for another being. The Crimson Dominion was unlike anything Sarah had ever imagined. The ship was vast beyond comprehension, more like a floating city than a vessel. Corridors stretched for miles, decorated with treasures from 1,000 worlds. The crew moved. With military precision, their various species united in their absolute deference to their emperor. Sarah tried not to gawk as she followed Forth through halls lined with crystalline windows that showed the star-streaked void of hyperspace. Kithara rode contentedly in her arms, pointing at various sights with delighted chirps. "These will be your quarters," Forth announced, stopping before ornate double doors that opened at his approach. "I trust they will be adequate." Sarah stepped inside and nearly stumbled. The suite was larger than her entire apartment on Haven's Rest. Rich fabrics in deep blues and golds decorated furniture that looked both alien and somehow familiar. A massive window dominated one wall, offering a panoramic view of space. "This is too much," she protested. "I just need a simple room." "You are under Imperial protection now," Forth replied. "These accommodations reflect your status as Kithara's guardian." "Guardian?" Sarah looked down at the Dragonling in her arms. "I thought I was just a caretaker." "Among my people, the distinction carries great significance. A guardian is responsible not just for physical well-being, but for education, development, and advocacy. You would speak for Kithara's interests in all matters." The weight of responsibility settled on Sarah's shoulders. She was being entrusted with the care of what was essentially a dragon princess. What about her education? Surely she needs to learn about dragon culture, imperial law, things I know nothing about. "She will have tutors for those subjects," Forth assured her. "But you will teach her something far more important. You will teach her about compassion." Over the following days, Sarah began to understand the magnitude of the task before her. Kithara was incredibly intelligent, absorbing lessons at a rate that amazed her tutors. She learned languages, mathematics, and galactic history with ease. But she also learned to laugh at Sarah's silly human jokes, to comfort the ship's smaller crew members when they seemed sad, and to approach problems with empathy rather than force. The transformation wasn't limited to Kithara. Sarah watched Vorth struggle with concepts that seemed foreign to his nature. He began asking questions about emotional responses, about the motivations of his subjects, about the difference between respect born of fear and respect born of admiration. "The Zephyrian rebellion puzzles me," he confided to Sarah one evening as they watched Kithara play with a holographic puzzle. "I have offered them generous terms for surrender, yet they refuse. Their resistance only brings suffering to their people." Sarah considered this carefully. Maybe they're not fighting against your terms. Maybe they're fighting for the right to choose their own future. But their independence would be economically disastrous. They lack the resources to govern themselves effectively. From your perspective, maybe. But they might value freedom more than prosperity. Vorth's golden eyes fixed on her with interest. "You think they would choose hardship over security? Humans do it all the time. We call it dignity." These conversations became a regular part of their routine. Sarah found herself in the impossible position of advising an emperor on matters of governance, drawing from her experience with diverse customers at the diner. Vorth, meanwhile, began to see his empire through entirely new eyes. The real test came when they reached the Zephyrian system. The rebellion had indeed escalated. 3 planets had declared independence, and Imperial forces were massed for a decisive strike. The ship's bridge was a hive of activity as generals and admirals presented their battle plans. "The rebel fleet is outnumbered 3-1, General Morthus reported. "We can crush their resistance within hours." Sarah stood at the back of the bridge, holding Kithara and feeling completely out of place among the military officers. She had no business being here, but Vorth had insisted on her presence. "Casualties?" Vorth asked. "Acceptable losses, my lord. Perhaps 50,000 military personnel, twice that among civilians if they resist evacuation." Sarah felt sick. These weren't numbers on a report. They were lives, families, individuals with hopes and fears just like anyone else. "There is another option," she said quietly. The bridge fell silent. Every eye turned to the human who had dared interrupt a military briefing. "You wish to address the Emperor?" General Morthus asked with barely concealed disdain. "Let her speak," Vorth commanded. Sarah took a deep breath, acutely aware that she was about to suggest something that could be seen as treason. "What if you talk to them first?" "We have sent surrender demands." "No, not demands. Conversation. Find out what they really want, what they're afraid of. Maybe there's a solution that doesn't require anyone to die." "The rebels have already shown their intentions through violence," another general protested. "Have they? Or have they shown desperation?" Sarah looked directly at Vorth. "You've taught me that strength isn't always about force. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is listen." Vorth was quiet for a long moment, considering. Around the bridge, his officers waited with visible tension. "Arrange a diplomatic channel," he finally ordered. "I will speak with the rebel leadership." The response was immediate outrage from his military staff. But Vorth silenced them with a gesture. Within hours, he was engaged in direct communication with the Zephyrian Rebel Council. Sarah watched from the sidelines as the Emperor she was beginning to know spoke with enemy leaders. He didn't threaten or demand. Instead, he asked questions. What were their grievances? What did they hope to achieve? What were their fears about imperial rule? The answers revealed a complex web of misunderstanding and historical grievances. The Zephyrians didn't hate the Empire. They feared absorption and cultural extinction. They had seen other systems lose their identity under imperial rule. Their unique traditions slowly eroded away. What if we offered protectorate status instead of full integration? Vorth suggested. You would maintain internal autonomy while benefiting from imperial protection and trade agreements. The rebel leaders were suspicious but intrigued. Negotiations continued for days, with Sarah offering insights about compromise and creative solutions. Kithara often sat nearby, playing quietly but clearly absorbing every word. When the treaty was finally signed, it represented something unprecedented in imperial history, a voluntary agreement between equals rather than a surrender by the defeated. "How did you know?" Forth asked Sarah as they watched the formal ceremony. "How did you know they would accept compromise?" "Because most conflicts aren't really about what people say they're about. They're about feeling heard, feeling respected, feeling like they have some control over their own lives." Forth nodded slowly. "I am beginning to understand why Kithara responded to you so quickly. You see beings, not categories." As if summoned by the mention of her name, Kithara climbed into Sarah's lap and chirped contentedly. Her scales now shone, with perfect health, and her eyes sparkled with intelligence and joy. "She's going to be an amazing leader someday," Sarah said, stroking the Dragonling's neck. "She's learning that power isn't about domination, it's about connection." "She is learning from the best teacher," Forth replied. Looking around the bridge, at officers who were beginning to view diplomacy as a tool rather than a weakness, Sarah realized that the lessons were flowing in both directions. She was changing an empire, one conversation at a time. But more importantly, she was helping raise a dragon who would one day rule with both strength and compassion, a combination that could transform the galaxy itself. 6 months after the Zephyrian Treaty, the effects of Sarah's influence had rippled throughout the Dragon Empire. What started as one human caring for a sick Dragonling had evolved into something much larger, a fundamental shift in how the Empire approached governance. Sarah had established what she called empathy councils on worlds throughout Imperial space. These groups consisted of representatives from different species and social classes, tasked with advising local governors on policy decisions. The idea was revolutionary, actually asking people what they needed before implementing changes. Kithara had grown significantly, both physically and intellectually. She was now the size of a large dog, her silver scales gleaming with health and vitality. More importantly, she had become the Empire's unofficial ambassador of compassion, accompanying Sarah to various worlds and demonstrating that dragons could be approachable and kind. "The council reports are encouraging," Vorth said, as he reviewed data tablets in his private study. Sarah sat nearby, helping Kithara with her language lessons. "Crime rates have dropped 17% across systems with active empathy councils. Productivity is up 12%. Most significantly, voluntary compliance with imperial law has increased by 31%. People tend to follow rules they help create," Sarah observed, not looking up from Kithara's work. "When they feel heard, they're more cooperative." "Father," Kithara said in her melodious young voice, "why did the old system work differently?" Vorth paused, considering how to answer. "The old ways emphasized strength and control. We believed that fear prevented rebellion. But fear also prevents growth," Kithara replied thoughtfully. "Sarah taught me that frightened beings cannot learn or create properly." Sarah smiled proudly. Kithara had absorbed these lessons naturally, applying them to everything from her studies to her interactions with the ship's crew. Their peaceful routine was interrupted by the arrival of an urgent message from the Imperial core worlds. Vorth's expression darkened as he read the communication. "What is it?" Sarah asked, noting his change in demeanor. "The High Council has called for an emergency session. There are concerns about my recent policy changes." Sarah felt a chill of premonition. "What kind of concerns?" "Some council members believe I have grown weak. They question whether my human influences have compromised my ability to rule effectively." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. She had known this day might come, but she had hoped the positive results would speak for themselves. "They want you to choose," she said quietly, "between the old ways and the new. It appears so." Vorth's voice was carefully controlled, but Sarah could hear the conflict beneath. "I must attend the council session. The ship will reach the Imperial capital within 2 days." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She stood at her window, watching the stars and trying to imagine a future where she and Kithara were separated. The Dragonling had been visiting human worlds regularly, learning about Earth culture and making friends among the diplomatic corps. She was becoming a bridge between species, a living symbol of cooperation. But if the council forced Vorth to choose tradition over progress, all of that would end. Cannot sleep either? Vorth's voice came from behind her. Sarah turned to find the Emperor standing in her doorway, looking older than she had ever seen him. I keep thinking about what happens next. As do I. He entered the room, moving to stand beside her at the window. For 3 millennia, I ruled through strength alone. It was effective, but I never truly understood my people. I never felt connected to them. Under your guidance, I have discovered what it means to lead with purpose beyond mere power. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the stars. The council fears change, Vorth continued. They believe that showing compassion will be interpreted as weakness by our enemies. Maybe some will see it that way initially, Sarah admitted. But strength isn't about making others afraid of you. Real strength is about inspiring others to be their best selves. You sound like you are preparing to leave. Sarah's heart clenched. If that's what's best for Kythera and the Empire, then yes. And if I refuse to let you go, then you would be proving the council right about being corrupted by human influence. She turned to face him fully. Vorth, you can't choose between being a good father and being a good emperor. You have to find a way to be both. Before he could respond, a small silver form appeared in the doorway. Kythera had awakened and sensed their distress. Why are you both sad? She asked, padding over to them. Sarah knelt to embrace the Dragonling. We're worried about some difficult decisions that need to be made. What kind of decisions? Vorth looked uncomfortable, clearly struggling with how much to tell his daughter. Sarah made the choice for him. Some people think your father has changed too much since meeting me. They want him to go back to the old ways of ruling. Kythera's scales flickered with agitation. But the old ways made people afraid. The new ways make people happy. Why would anyone want fear instead of happiness? Because fear is easier to understand, Sarah explained gently. Happiness requires work and patience and listening to others. Fear just requires strength. But we are dragons, Kythera protested. We have both strength and wisdom. Why not use both? From the mouths of babes, Sarah thought. Or in this case, dragonlings. She is right, Vorth said quietly. I have spent so long believing that strength and compassion were mutually exclusive. But Kythera embodies both. She is fierce when she needs to be, gentle when circumstances call for it. The council won't see it that way, Sarah warned. They'll see a child influenced by human softness. Then they will see incorrectly. Vorth's voice took on the commanding tone that had cowed star systems. Kythera is the future of this empire. She represents evolution, not corruption. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Vorth met with his advisors, reviewed legal precedents, and prepared arguments for the coming confrontation. Sarah helped Kythera with her studies, trying to maintain normalcy while her heart broke at the thought of separation. When they reached the imperial capital, Sarah was amazed by its scope. The planet was one massive city, with spires reaching toward the sky and vast governmental complexes that housed the bureaucracy of a galactic empire. The imperial palace sat at the center like a glittering jewel, its architecture a testament to dragon artistry and engineering. Will I be allowed to attend the council session? Sarah asked as they prepared to disembark. Council sessions are traditionally closed to outsiders, Vorth replied. But tradition has been changing lately. Sarah understood the implication. By bringing her to the capital, Vorth was making a statement. He was declaring that human insight had value in imperial governance. As they walked through the palace corridors toward the council chamber, Sarah felt the weight of history. These halls had witnessed 3 millennia of dragon rule, decisions that shaped the destiny of countless worlds. Now they would witness something unprecedented. The possibility that an empire built on conquest could transform into something built on cooperation. Kythera walked between them, her head held high with unconscious nobility. She was no longer the sick, frightened child Sarah had first met. She was becoming the leader the galaxy needed. Strong enough to defend the innocent, wise enough to seek alternatives to violence, and compassionate enough to see every being as worthy of consideration. Whatever happened in the council chamber, Sarah knew she had already succeeded in her most important mission. She had helped heal not just a dragon child, but the heart of an empire itself. The Imperial Council chamber was a sight that took Sarah's breath away. 12 massive thrones arranged in a circle, each carved from a different precious stone and sized to accommodate ancient dragons of enormous proportions. The air shimmered with power, heavy with the weight of millennia of decisions that had shaped galactic civilization. 11 of the thrones were occupied by the High Council, dragons so old their scales had taken on the deep, rich hues of aged metal. Their eyes burned with the wisdom and cynicism of centuries. At the center of the circle sat Vorth's throne, magnificent but somehow less imposing than the others. Sarah stood in the gallery reserved for observers, technically present, but clearly unwelcome. Kythera had been relegated to the young dragon section, though her presence was itself unprecedented. No dragon under their first century had ever been permitted to witness High Council proceedings. Emperor Vorthak, intoned Counselor Zerath, eldest of the assembly, you stand accused of compromising imperial sovereignty through excessive integration of alien influence. How do you answer? Vorth rose, his full form finally visible without holographic disguise. He was magnificent. Scales of molten gold and crimson flame, wings that could span a city block, eyes that burned with the fire of stars. Yet Sarah could see the tension in his posture, the careful control he maintained over his power. I answer that the Empire has grown stronger, not weaker, under my recent policies, he replied. Crime is down, productivity is up, and voluntary compliance with imperial law has reached historic highs. Statistics can be manipulated, declared Counselor Thane, her bronze scales gleaming with disdain. What cannot be disputed is that you have allowed a human, to influence policy decisions that affect trillions of imperial citizens. I have sought wisdom wherever it could be found, Vorth countered. Is this not the duty of a leader? The duty of a dragon emperor, rumbled Counselor Vex, is to maintain the strength and purity of dragon rule. Our people conquered the galaxy through superior power and intellect, not through the weak sentimentality of lesser species. Sarah felt anger flare in her chest, but she forced herself to remain silent. This was Vorth's battle to fight. Lesser species? Vorth's voice carried a dangerous edge. The humans created interstellar trade routes that increased imperial wealth by 40%. The Altarians developed medical techniques that have extended dragon lifespans. The Nexari provided artistic achievements that have enriched our culture beyond measure. In what way are such contributions lesser? They are useful tools, admitted Counselor Thane, but tools do not sit at the table with their masters. It was then that Kythera did something that shocked everyone in the chamber. She stood up in the young dragon section and spoke in a clear, carrying voice. Then what am I? The council turned to stare at her in outrage. Young dragons simply did not speak during council sessions. It was unthinkable. I am half my father's blood, Kythera continued, showing no fear despite facing the most powerful beings in the galaxy. But I am also half my experiences, and my experiences have been shaped by human wisdom as much as dragon strength. Silence, roared Counselor Vex. You forget your place, child. Do I? Kythera's voice remained steady. My place is as heir to the dragon throne, and the being who taught me what that truly means is standing in your observer gallery, labeled as an outsider despite having healed both my body and my spirit. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. The little dragon she had cared for was defending her before the highest powers in the Empire. The child has been corrupted beyond redemption, declared Zerath coldly. This proves our point entirely. Does it? Vorth stepped forward, his power radiating through the chamber. Let me tell you what corruption looks like, honored counselors. Corruption is ruling through fear alone. Corruption is seeing our subjects as resources to be exploited rather than beings to be protected. Corruption is allowing tradition to blind us to wisdom, simply because it comes from an unexpected source. You speak of wisdom, said Counselor Thane. But where is the wisdom in weakening our position? Our enemies see compassion as vulnerability. They will exploit any perceived softness, and will they? Vorth gestured toward a holographic display that materialized in the center of the chamber. Let me show you what our enemies actually see. The display showed recent intelligence reports from across the galaxy. Sarah was astonished to see how other empires and independent systems were reacting to the changes in dragon policy. The Altarian Federation has opened formal diplomatic channels. For the first time in 2 centuries, Vorth continued, the Free Traders Consortium has increased commerce with imperial worlds by 60%. Even the notorious stellar pirates, Guild has agreed to cease raiding our shipping lanes in exchange for legitimate employment opportunities. Temporary gains, scoffed Counselor Vex. They seek to lull us into complacency before striking. For 200 years, 300? At what point do we acknowledge that mutual benefit creates stronger bonds than mutual fear? Sarah watched the council members exchange glances. Some looked intrigued despite themselves. Others remained firmly opposed. But she could see that Vorth's arguments were having an effect. There is another factor to consider, said Counselor Nix, who had remained silent until now. Her ancient scales were deep purple, almost black, and her voice carried the weight of aeons. The human's influence extends beyond policy. She has accomplished something none of our healers could achieve. All eyes turned to Kithra, who stood proudly in the young dragon section. Her silver scales gleamed with perfect health. Her posture radiated confidence and her eyes sparkled with intelligence and compassion. The child was dying, Nix continued. Not from any physical ailment, but from spiritual starvation. She needed something we could not provide. Unconditional love given freely without expectation of return. This is not weakness. It is a form of strength we had forgotten existed. You would have us become an empire of soft-hearted fools. Thane protested. I would have us become an empire capable of inspiring loyalty rather than merely demanding it. Nix replied. There is a difference between strength and brutality, just as there is a difference between wisdom and mere knowledge. The debate continued for hours, with the council deeply divided. Some members argued for maintaining traditional dragon supremacy. Others, influenced by the undeniable success of recent policies, advocated for gradual integration of new approaches. Finally, Zerath called for formal judgment. The question before us is simple. Has the Emperor's acceptance of human influence strengthened or weakened the Empire? Each counselor will cast their vote. As the voting proceeded, Sarah held her breath. She knew that her own fate was tied to the outcome, but more importantly, the future of millions of beings across the galaxy hung in the balance. The vote was closer than anyone had expected. 6 counselors voted to censure Vorth and demand the removal of human influence, while 5 voted to support his policies. As the eldest, Zerath's vote would break the tie. The ancient dragon was quiet for a long moment, his eyes moving from Vorth to Kithara to Sarah herself. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful rather than commanding. I have ruled for longer than most civilizations have existed, he said. I have seen empires rise and fall, species evolve and go extinct, stars born and die. In all that time, I believed that power was the only currency that mattered. He paused, looking directly at Kithara. But I have never seen a dragon child recover from soul sickness through power alone. I have never seen voluntary compliance increase through threats. I have never witnessed the kind of loyalty that grows from gratitude rather than fear. Sarah's heart pounded as she waited for his decision. The human stays, Zerath declared, and the new policies continue. But with one condition, they must prove their long-term effectiveness. If these reforms show weakness in the face of genuine threats, we will reconvene to reconsider. Relief flooded through Sarah as she realized she would not be separated from Kithara. But more than that, she felt hope for the countless beings whose lives would be touched by an empire learning to rule with both strength and compassion. As the council session ended and the ancient dragons filed out, Vorth approached Sarah with an expression of profound gratitude. Thank you, he said simply. For what? For showing me that the greatest strength is knowing when not to use force. Kithara bounded over to them, her joy infectious. Does this mean Sarah can stay forever? Vorth smiled, a genuine expression of warmth that would have shocked his enemies. It means we have work to do. All of us, together. As they left the council chamber, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She had started as a simple waitress trying to help a sick child. Now she was part of something much larger. The transformation of an empire from within. The real work was just beginning. 5 years had passed since that pivotal council session, and the Dragon Empire had transformed beyond recognition. What had begun as one human simple act of kindness had evolved into a galactic renaissance of cooperation and understanding. Sarah stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Harmony Station, watching as delegates from hundreds of species gathered for the first-ever Galactic Cooperation Summit. The space station itself was a marvel of collaborative engineering, built jointly by dragon architects, human engineers, Altarian artists, and Nexari quantum technicians. Nervous? Vorth asked, approaching with 2 cups of earth coffee. Even after all these years, he still marveled at the simple pleasure humans found in the bitter beverage. Terrified, Sarah admitted, accepting the cup gratefully. A year ago, these species were either neutral toward each other or actively hostile. Now we're asking them to work together on galactic-scale problems. A year ago, you were a waitress on a backwater trading station, Vorth pointed out with a gentle smile. Yet you convinced the Dragon High Council to abandon 3 millennia of tradition. I have faith in your abilities. Through the massive viewport, they could see ships arriving from across the galaxy. Sleek Vorthan vessels docked alongside sturdy Korgan freighters. Ethereal Sephiran lightships shared berths with practical human transports. Most remarkably of all, former enemies were greeting each other with respect rather than suspicion. Father, Sarah. Kythera's voice rang out across the observation deck. She bounded toward them. No longer the small dragonling Sarah had first met, but a magnificent young dragon, whose silver scales now shimmered with hints of gold. At 7 years old, she was already larger than most human vehicles, yet she retained the gentle spirit that had made her special from the beginning. The delegates are asking for you, Kythera continued, slightly out of breath from her excitement. The Zephyrian ambassador wants to thank Sarah personally for the cultural preservation protocols. And the Nexari delegation has brought gifts for the entire organizing committee. Sarah shook her head in amazement. The cultural preservation protocols had been one of her first major policy contributions, guidelines ensuring that imperial expansion would protect rather than erase local traditions. What had seemed like common sense to her had revolutionized imperial governance. Are you ready for your speech? Vorth asked Kythera. The young dragon's confidence faltered slightly. I think so. But what if they don't take me seriously? I'm still just a child by dragon standards. Sarah set down her coffee and placed a gentle hand on Kythera's snout. You're not just any child. You're the dragon who grew up believing that strength and kindness go hand in hand. You're the living proof that different approaches can coexist. When you speak, you're not just representing yourself, you're representing the future. Kythera's scales brightened with renewed confidence. You always know what to say. That's because I learned from the best teacher, Sarah replied, glancing meaningfully at Vorth. The summit's opening ceremony was held in the station's Great Hall, a vast space designed to accommodate beings of every conceivable size and configuration. Sarah watched from the speaker's platform as hundreds of delegates took their places, some in environmental suits, others breathing different atmospheric mixtures, all united by a common purpose. Vorth opened the proceedings with a speech that would have been unthinkable from a dragon emperor just 5 years earlier. Instead of pronouncements and demands, he offered collaboration and mutual respect. He spoke of the Empire not as conquerors but as partners in galactic civilization. When Kythera's turn came to address the assembly, Sarah felt her heart swell with pride. The young dragon spoke with poise and wisdom, outlining a vision of cooperative expansion, where new worlds would be welcomed as partners rather than absorbed as territories. My father taught me about strength, Kythera said, her clear voice carrying to every corner of the hall. My tutors taught me about history and law, but Sarah taught me about connection, the invisible bonds that link all conscious beings across the galaxy. Today we celebrate not the dominance of any single species, but the potential that emerges when we combine our unique gifts. The response was thunderous applause from beings who had never imagined they would cheer for a dragon princess. But this was the new reality, a galaxy where former enemies had become allies, where diversity was seen as strength rather than threat. As the formal sessions began, Sarah found herself at the center of discussions that would reshape galactic civilization, trade agreements that prioritized fair exchange over exploitation, defense pacts based on mutual aid rather than protection payments, scientific collaborations that pooled knowledge for the benefit of all. The breakthrough moment came during a deadlock negotiation between the Stellar Mining Consortium and the Indigenous Worlds Alliance. The miners needed access to rare elements found only on certain planets, while the inhabitants feared environmental destruction and cultural contamination. What if we reframe the question? Sarah suggested during a tense break in negotiations. Instead of asking, how can we get what we need? What if we ask, how can we all get what we need? The solution, when it emerged, was elegant in its simplicity. The mining consortium would provide advanced technology and education in exchange for limited, carefully monitored extraction rights. The indigenous worlds would maintain sovereignty over their territories, while gaining access to galactic markets and knowledge. Both sides would benefit, and neither would be exploited. "You make it look easy," observed Ambassador Thex of the Korgan Republic as the agreement was signed. "It's not easy," Sarah replied, "but it is simple. Most conflicts exist because people are afraid they won't get what they need. When you show them a path where everyone's needs can be met, cooperation becomes obvious." As the summit progressed, Sarah realized that something unprecedented was happening. Species that had been isolated for millennia were discovering common ground. Technologies were being shared freely. Cultural exchanges were planned. Most importantly, a framework was emerging for resolving future conflicts through dialogue rather than warfare. On the final day of the summit, as delegates prepared to return to their homeworlds carrying treaties and trade agreements, Forth found Sarah standing alone on the observation deck. "Regrets?" he asked, joining her at the viewport. "About what?" "Leaving your quiet life on Haven's Rest. Taking on the responsibility of changing a galaxy." Sarah considered the question seriously. Her life had indeed changed beyond all recognition. She was no longer a simple waitress, she was now the Empire's Director of Interspecies Relations, advisor to the Dragon Emperor, and guardian to the heir of the galactic throne. "Do you know what I realized today?" she said finally. "I haven't changed the galaxy at all. I've just helped beings remember what they already knew. That connection is stronger than conflict. That understanding prevents more problems than force solves. You underestimate your influence?" "Maybe, but I think the real change came from Kythera. She's the one who proves that different ways of thinking can coexist. She's strong like a dragon, but compassionate like a human. When she takes the throne someday, she'll rule an empire that values both qualities equally." As if summoned by their conversation, Kythera appeared beside them. She was exhausted from the day's events but glowing with satisfaction. "The Altarian delegation wants to establish an exchange program," she reported, "and the Free Traders Guild has agreed to help transport cultural artifacts between species. Oh, and the Zephyrians have invited me to visit their homeworld to see the independence celebration." "All excellent developments," Vorth said approvingly. "You handled the negotiations beautifully." "I had good teachers," Kythera replied, settling beside them to watch the stars. They stood together in comfortable silence, three beings from different backgrounds who had somehow become a family. Around them, the space station hummed with activity as delegates finalized agreements and prepared for departure. "What happens next?" Kythera asked. "Now the real work begins," Sarah replied. "Treaties are just words until people make them real. We'll need to monitor implementations, resolve disputes, and probably prevent a few wars along the way." "Sounds challenging," Kythera said with a grin that revealed rows of pearlescent teeth. "The best challenges usually are," Vorth added. As Sarah looked out at the vast expanse of space, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. It had started with a sick dragon child in a diner on Haven's Rest. It was ending, or rather, beginning anew, with a galactic civilization learning to value cooperation over conquest. She had sought only to help one lonely child. In doing so, she had helped heal the heart of an empire and the soul of its emperor. Most importantly, she had raised a dragon princess who would someday rule not through fear, but through the revolutionary power of compassion. In the distance, ships began departing for homeworlds across the galaxy, carrying with them the seeds of a new age. An age where strength and kindness would no longer be seen as opposites, but as complementary forces that together could build something greater than either could achieve alone. The waitress from Haven's Rest smiled as she watched the stars, knowing that the universe had just become a little bit kinder, one connection at a time.